Scary or creepy? To me, those are two very different things. And during that long fall ride I took a few years back, I think I experienced both. Several years ago, I packed all my camping gear onto my bicycle and spent the next 7 months riding across the western US, all by myself. Around 5,300 miles of just me, my bike, and the open road. Most nights I preferred wild camping. Instead of paying to sleep in a crowded campground, I'd find a quiet patch of woods somewhere I could disappear into the trees and not be noticed. That fall, I learned quickly that the forest is never truly quiet. The sound of crickets, toads, and the soft rustling of leaves in the wind became my comfort at night. Sometimes I'd even hear coyotes howling in the distance or owls calling back and forth. There was something oddly peaceful about it. That steady rhythm of nature in the cool autumn air. But one night in western Montana, that peace disappeared. I'd spent the entire day pedaling through long, empty roads and finally found a spot to camp deep in the woods. I went through my usual routine, pitched the tent, ate dinner, wrote in my journal, checked my map for the next day. When the sun set, I crawled into my sleeping bag. And that's when I realized something was wrong. The forest was completely silent. No crickets, no toads, not even the faintest breeze to move the dry fall leaves still hanging from the trees. It was like the world around me had just stopped. It wasn't peaceful silence, it was heavy. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until it almost hums. I can only describe it as the loudest silence I've ever heard. It felt like the entire forest was holding its breath, hiding from something I couldn't see. Every small sound, a twig snapping somewhere out there, echoed like a gunshot in the dark. I barely slept that night, just laid there, staring at the fabric of my tent, waiting for something to move. The relief I felt when the first bird sang before dawn, I'll never forget it. That was my creepiest night. But the night I was truly scared for my life came about a month later in southern Washington. I was still riding alone through the cool fall woods, heading toward Portland. That evening, I started feeling sick, really sick. Turns out I'd gotten food poisoning. I spent the night curled up in my tent, constantly leaning out to throw up. I'd rinse my mouth, drink a bit of water, lay back down, and then it would start all over again. By around 4 a.m., I was completely drained. I didn't have the energy to keep going, but I couldn't just stay there. My water was gone, and the nearest town was about 30 miles away. I decided I'd try to make it there, get a room, and rest. As the first light broke through the foggy fall morning, it started raining. Just my luck. I waited out the short storm, packed up, and pushed my bike back to the road. I started pedaling and immediately noticed something off. My back tire was flat. So there I was, weak, shivering in the cold drizzle, trying to fix a tire in the middle of nowhere. It took way longer than it should have. By the time I got it done, it was raining again. I turned on my lights, put on my jacket, and just kept going. That ride was pure misery. I was wet, hungry, dehydrated, and exhausted in every possible way. Every push of the pedals felt like it took everything I had left. But somehow, I made it to that small-town motel. Took a long, hot shower, called my mom, then slept for 13 straight hours. When I woke up the next day, I actually felt fine, good enough to keep going. I even made it to Portland before the food poisoning hit me again. But that time, I was in civilization, I could handle it. Looking back, the flat tire and rain were just demoralizing. But that first night, the silent one in Montana during that eerie fall, was different. That night, I genuinely felt something out there, something the whole forest seemed afraid of, and that was the most scared I've ever been while camping.
This goes back a couple of decades. I was living in London at the time, and every 6 or 8 weeks I'd escape the city, just pack up my gear and head out hiking or camping. It was my way of resetting from all the noise and chaos. One time, a friend asked to come along, so the two of us decided on the New Forest down in the southwest of England. Despite the name, the New Forest isn't really new at all. It's ancient woodland, one of the few places in the UK where the forest still feels untouched. It was early fall, the air was cool, and the trees were shifting into shades of amber and gold. We walked along the maintained trails most of the morning, and by mid-afternoon, we decided to step off the path and head deeper into the woods, into the real forest. I pulled out my compass, took a bearing, and we started pushing through the trees and tall ferns for maybe a mile or so. Then, out of nowhere, I got this strange sensation. I stopped walking, put my hand on my friend's shoulder, and said, "Listen." The forest had gone completely silent. No bird song, no rustle of wind through the leaves, not even the faint hum of insects. Just nothing. It wasn't threatening, not exactly, more like curious, like the woods were quietly watching us. After a few moments, we shrugged it off and kept walking until we found a clearing, broad, circular, and perfect for camping. We set up our tents, dug a fire pit, gathered some fallen branches for wood, and before long we had a small fire burning. The smell of the damp fall earth and smoke mixed in the air. We made dinner, opened a bottle of whiskey, and started talking, laughing, and swapping stories. That weird feeling from earlier had completely vanished. By the time the fire burned down to embers, we were exhausted. We stomped out the coals, poured water over them, and even threw soil, just to be sure. Then we said goodnight and crawled into our tents. Normally, it takes me a while to fall asleep when I'm camping, but that night, maybe it was the whiskey, maybe the long day, I was out instantly. Sometime in the night, I woke up. I could hear yelling, faint, far away, a man's voice somewhere beyond the trees. I couldn't make out any words, and it didn't sound like distress, just distant shouting echoing through the forest. For some reason, I wasn't alarmed. I just thought it was odd and drifted back to sleep. Then I woke up again. This time there was light, bright white light shining through the side of my tent. It wasn't a torch or lantern. It was a perfect sphere, maybe a little larger than a tennis ball, about 20 yards away. It glided across the clearing in a straight line, smooth, steady, not bobbing or flickering. And as soon as I saw it, that same curious feeling came over me again. Only now, I felt that whatever it was, it knew I was there. I reached for the zipper to open my tent and get a better look, but the second I touched it, a clear voice in my head said, "Don't look." It wasn't scary, just firm, like when an adult warns a child not to touch something dangerous. My hand froze. Then the voice said again, "Go back to sleep." And I did. Not like drifting off on my own. It felt like something reached out and pulled me into sleep. When I opened my eyes, the sun was up. Everything looked exactly the same. The campsite was untouched, quiet, peaceful. But I felt incredible, like I'd had the deepest, most refreshing sleep of my life. My friend's tent zipper opened, and he peeked out with a huge grin. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied. "How are you feeling?" "Great," he laughed. "Best night of sleep I've had in ages." "Me too," I said. "And after all that whiskey last night, I don't even have a hangover." "Same here," he said, shaking his head. "We got lucky." We brewed some tea, had breakfast, started packing up. As we were breaking camp, I asked him, "Did you see or hear anything weird last night?" He thought for a second, then shrugged. "Nope, slept like a rock, out cold." "Really?" I said, "because I heard someone yelling out in the woods." He paused, frowned a little, and said, "Actually, yeah, now that you mention it, I did hear something. From over there." He pointed behind my tent. "That's strange," I said. "I heard it from the opposite direction." He went back to packing his gear, and I almost asked him if he'd seen anything, but decided against it. I mean, who wants to sound crazy talking about glowing lights and voices in your head? We finished packing, grabbed lunch at a pub on the drive back to London, and that was that. It's been over 20 years since that night. I'm in my 50s now, and I've never experienced anything like it before or since. But even now, I still remember how I felt that morning. Completely refreshed, completely awake. Like whatever happened out there in that autumn forest wasn't meant to scare us, just to watch us.
It was late October, and the forest in northern Michigan looked straight out of a painting. Orange leaves, cold air, and that quiet, still feeling you only get in fall. I was 24, on my first solo backpacking trip. Just 2 nights, 12 miles through the woods. The hike was peaceful at first, but when I reached the campground deep in a valley, things felt off. No wind, no sound, not even insects. It was colder than expected, and the creek nearby was completely dry. I rationed my water, skipped dinner, and tried to sleep. Hours passed, I could hear faint animal noises until suddenly everything stopped. Total silence. Then I felt it. The ground vibrating softly beneath me. At first I thought it was my imagination until I heard footsteps. It sounded like a group of people marching. Dozens of boots thudding against the trail. Then came whispering, like 100 voices talking at once, too soft to understand. I checked the time, 2 a.m. I froze, afraid to even breathe. The sound grew louder, closer, then stopped. Dead silence again. I could feel eyes on me, like something or someone was just outside. I quietly took the safety off my gun and waited. Then suddenly, boom. It felt like the whole ground exploded. My tent shook violently, my ears rang, and I thought I'd fired my gun by accident, but the rounds were all still there. A roaring noise faded into the distance, almost like a jet tearing through the sky. I jumped out with my flashlight, scanning the woods. Nothing. Just the cold, still air of fall pressing against me. I didn't sleep after that. At sunrise, the forest looked peaceful again, almost too normal. Golden light, falling leaves, no sign of anything. I packed up and hiked straight out. That was the last time I ever went solo backpacking. Even now, whenever fall comes and the woods go quiet, I still remember that night.
Back in my hometown in Connecticut, we had this little routine, parking on dead-end streets or quiet cul-de-sacs just to hang out, talk, and smoke a little weed. Nothing crazy, just stupid teenage stuff. I wasn't there that night, but my friends told me exactly what went down. They decided to drive up to the state line. There was this small, empty park at the bottom of a big hill. The trees were mostly bare, and you could hear every leaf crunch underfoot. It was one of those cold, silent fall nights where sound seems to travel forever. They parked their car near the edge of the woods, far from the hill, keeping low and quiet, just kids trying not to get caught. Then, out of nowhere, a cop car rolled in. Maybe he was just patrolling or using the lot to turn around. Either way, my friends froze. They darted into the woods, hiding behind old fallen trees and stumps, trying not to breathe too loud. The cop's spotlight swept across the park, cutting through the thin mist that hung low over the ground. It even shined into the trees a few times, but they stayed dead still. Then, the cop drove up the hill, probably thinking he'd be out of sight and my friends would sneak back to the car. That's when they took their chance and ran deeper into the woods, hearts pounding, branches snapping under their shoes. After a while, the siren stopped, but the headlights were still glowing faintly through the trees. They waited. Then, beep, beep. The car alarm went off. The cops had set it off on purpose. On a quiet street like that, it echoed through the whole neighborhood. They were hoping someone would come out to shut it off, or that my friends would panic and give themselves away. But they didn't move. They just stayed crouched in the dark for almost a half hour listening to that alarm blare through the cold fall air. Eventually, the cops gave up. They searched around a bit, then left. My friends waited even longer before coming out. Finally, when it felt safe, they went back to the car and drove everyone home, still whispering and laughing nervously about how close that had been. But later that night, things took a turn. One of them, my closest friend, was jolted awake around 2 a.m. His parents were up and the lights were on. The cops were inside their house. They'd broken in. They were in his parents' bedroom, questioning them in the middle of the night, asking why their car was parked at that park earlier. His mom, who was a lawyer, stayed calm. She knew her rights, but she could also tell those cops didn't really care about the law at that moment. She played it cool, gave them short answers until they finally left. The next morning, she told them what happened. She wasn't angry. She just said, "Be careful for a while." They'll probably be watching you." And sure enough, for weeks after that, he said he saw a police cruiser parked just down the street, idling some nights, lights off. It wasn't some ghost story. It wasn't a monster in the woods. But he still chills me, because it really happened. Sometimes, the scariest thing out there on a quiet fall night is just another human being with power and no reason to fear you.